God has set aside a day in the week for mankind to remember who is the creator of everything that his eyes see in the heavens and on the earth. It is the only day in the 7-day weekly cycle that has been named by God himself, and it is called the Sabbath, that means rest. It is amazing to find that in different parts of the earth throughout history, it has been preserved. Off the coast of Ireland in the Atlantic Ocean is an island called Skellig Michael, a once sacred place where men worship God in isolation from barbarian invasions. You try to imagine how men constructed a culture in this remote place where it has now become a magnet for new ages, including cinematographers like film director J.J. Abrams, where Star Wars and its humanist philosophy chose this site because of its remoteness and its beauty. But this was once a place where highly cultured Irishmen kept and preserved the seventh-day creation Sabbath and beautiful illuminated manuscripts. If you ever grew up in England in the 1970s and the 1980s, Ireland was known for its sectarian violence, and the Irish were viewed as illiterate, violent, dumb, backwards and drunkards. Yet the Irish once had the highest culture in Europe. When the 12th century English Pope Adrian IV took the seat of the papacy, he made Ireland into a fiefdom of England and enforced both the English culture and Catholicism upon the Irish by an English king, Henry II, who landed in Ireland in 1172 and made the pontiffs the feudal lords of the Emerald Isle thanks to the forged document of the donation of Constantine and the papal bull Laudabilita. But James Ussher, an Irishman, prolific scholar, Calvinist and Protestant Archbishop of Armagh and Primate of all Ireland, documented in his voluminous works that Ireland was once the centre of learning throughout the whole of Western Europe, Skellig Michael being one of its chief centres of learning. James Ussher said, "Among our Irish, our monasteries in ancient time were the seminaries of the ministry, being, as it were, so many colleges of learned divines, whereunto the people resort for instruction, and from whence the church was wont continually to be supplied with able ministers. Yet this was the principal means whereby the knowledge both of the scriptures and of all other good learning was preserved in that inundation of barbarism wherewith the whole West was in a manner overwhelmed. The Emerald Isle was at one time the seat of learning, where it produced some of the finest scholars, and James Ussher's works have been verified in more recent times in 1969 in part 1 of a 13-part series documentary by BBC Television titled Civilization by British author, museum director and broadcaster, the late Right Honourable Lord Kenneth Clarke, where a portion of it focuses on Skellig Michael. And Lord Kenneth Clarke narrated that they had the highest culture throughout Western Christendom, distinguishing it from the rest of Europe, and he tells us what made their high culture distinct and unique.
Of course, there was a pope in the ruined, beleaguered city of Rome, but the Celtic Church owed no allegiance to him.
40 years ago in 1976, a book was written titled America BC by Barry Fell that built upon the foundation of that series Civilization, and it gives a powerful insight into a church that is still relatively unknown. He calls the men who led this church monks, but they should rightly be called ministers, evangelists, teachers, and laymen. In his recent lecture series and book Civilization, Lord Kenneth Clarke has depicted the monks of Ireland in the Dark Ages as the repository of learning while Europe lay shattered by the barbarian invaders. In their stone cells and remote island hermitages, these devoted servants of God somehow contrived to keep the oil burning in the few fragile lamps that survived the collapse of the Western Empire. For 4 centuries, they alone preserved the learning of the ancients. They had such a high culture that of recent, Bank of America Merrill Lynch has given funding to Trinity College in Dublin, Ireland to preserve some of the oldest manuscripts in Western Europe to go on display in 2016 so people can see a side of Christianity that very few know about. Their artwork was amazing. Their illuminated manuscripts, bright colors, and intricate spirals shows men who were very detailed and dedicated to making their culture rich. Not like the dry looking Bibles we have today with its plain covers. Theirs was top class, and in modern times it has attracted visitors from all over the world. Barry Fell continues. Soon from the monasteries of Ireland and the dusty shelves of Trinity College Dublin came forth a stream of hitherto unknown manuscripts and books, decorated in a lavish and most beautiful Romanesque variant of the so-called Gothic lettering, inlaid with jewels, bound in gold, the most beautiful books the world has ever seen, and all of them composed in either the Old Irish or the Latin tongue, or both. Scholars and dilettanti came from faraway places to gaze upon the discoveries, and linguists now took up the study of ancient Celtic writings. Ireland emerged into the world of European scholarship as the saviour of civilization during the darkest age of the barbarian invasion. The Book of Ballymote is thought to have been assembled about 800 years ago from a collection of miscellaneous manuscripts. It deals with about 70 varieties of ancient Celtic script called collectively by the name Ogam, meaning grooved writing. This stone slab in the British Museum is written in Ogam, and upon close inspection you can see how this alphabet once looked like. This is the grooved writing. And these are the manuscripts from the Book of Ballymote, where they had up to 70 different Celtic scripts that enhanced the literacy of this rich Irish culture. When the rest of Europe was sinking deeper and deeper into the Dark Ages, where only the priests were allowed to be trained in reading, these Irish Celts knew that the best way to enrich a culture is teaching it how to read, and their Bibles were encased with precious gems that were truly decked with jewels. These were called cumdach, book shrine, and this was the high culture of Ireland, but they did not keep their culture to themselves. They shared it throughout the rest of Europe, and they sailed across the sea and first set up shop in Scotland. If you are to ever visit Scotland, the people are very straightforward and very friendly. The scenery is absolutely beautiful, and its snow-capped mountains are an absolute gorgeous sight that if you are on a train or even on a coach, you can see that even the Scots are awestruck when they are observing their own country's beauty. There is a kind of an escapism in nature. When you come out of the tenseness of the cities into the country, it is one of the best ways to de-stress and relax. And Scotland, especially in the Highlands, was the first place to taste this rich culture of the Irish. And one of their sons knew this as well, the Scotsman J.A. Wiley. He said that Scotland first tasted of a little civilization from the Roman sword. A small country, it was parted by barbarism as well as by distance from the rest of the world. In the wake of the Roman power came the missionaries of the cross, and the gospel found disciples where Caesar had been able to achieve no triumphs. Next came Columba, who kindled his evangelical lamp on the rocks of Iona. On a very clear day, you can see Ireland from Scotland. And one of these places is Iona, a small island in Scotland where the people are generally friendly and chilled, and like Skellig Michael, this place that was once the centre of a missionary outpost has also been a magnet for people with New Age sentiments. It does have a chill out factor to it. There are crosses that are a reminder of the Irish Celtic culture on that isle, and it does have quite a few animals where, if you are fortunate, a robin would stop for a selfie. The Highland sheep are beautiful. They are different from the sheep throughout the rest of the British Isles, for they are black, and just as chilled as the locals. And if you blend in with the people, you can even end up feeding the sheep. And if you show them care and affection, they will take a shine too. On a clear autumn night, you can also see and get the privilege of looking at the Northern Lights. But what made this church different from the churches of today that have been labelled as a mainstream Christianity? A 19th century Swiss historian, d'Aubigné, a descendant of Protestant refugees from France who received an honorary Oxford doctorate, described their unique brand of Christianity. The sages of Iona knew nothing of transubstantiation or of the withdrawal of the cup in the Lord's Supper, or of auricular confession, or of prayers to the dead, or tapers, or incense. They celebrated Easter on a different day from Rome. Synodal assemblies regulated the church. The papal supremacy was unknown. A pre-Reformation church in Europe, totally separate and distinct from papal Rome. But those practices weren't the only things that distinguished her from Rome. The 11th century Hungarian-born English queen, who married into the Scottish nobility, Queen Margaret, was a very zealous Catholic who believed that no other church should exist but Rome, and was quite surprised that the Scots were working on Sunday like it was any other day of the week. Why was that? In a book titled Margaret of Scotland by a Presbyterian minister who pioneered the way for the establishment of an orthopedic hospital for children, Thomas Ratcliffe Barnett said, "The Celtic Church failed to reverence the Lord's Day, employing it for worldly business. In this matter, the Scots had perhaps kept up the traditional usage of the ancient Irish Church, which observed Saturday instead of Sunday. It is plain that according to the old Columban rule, what we now call Saturday was considered to be the day of rest before the Lord's Day. That is, before Roman Catholicism came with its paganized form of Christianity." It was the 6th century Irishman Columba who founded Iona Abbey and introduced the seventh-day creation Sabbath to the Hibernian Scots with his 12 colleagues, where the Scots tasted of that high Irish culture. This is not hearsay. His own deathbed confession confirmed this, that was recorded by his own servant Diarmid in a book. And this is what Columba said: "In the sacred volumes, this day is called the Sabbath, which is interpreted rest. And this day is truly a Sabbath for me, because it is for me the last day of this present laborious life, on which I rest after the fatigues of my labours. And this night at midnight, when begins the solemn day of the Lord, according to the saying of the Scriptures, I shall go the way of my fathers." The Irish and the Scots once had the highest culture in Western Europe and preserved civilization with the finest manuscripts and literature, and they kept the seventh-day creation Sabbath. But for some strange reason, this is one of the best kept secrets of European history. This is an area which I'll look at in an up-and-coming project about the Sabbath, a day that has been lost in time.